For centuries, we've all been completely fascinated and honestly pretty terrified by one chilling reality, the psychopathic mind. Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving right in to systematically deconstruct the psychological architecture of those folks who operate in the shadows of human emotion. We're going to look past the myths, right? Past those exaggerated Hollywood dramatizations, and look directly into the actual mechanics of the predators walking among us. Because this isn't just about understanding some rare psychiatric condition. No. It's about dissecting the literal anatomy of manipulation. By the time we wrap up here, we'll have mapped out exactly how a mind can be entirely detached from the emotions that bind the rest of us together. And more importantly, how that detachment gets weaponized in everyday life.
So, what truly drives manipulative behavior? I mean, it's so easy to just assume manipulation is, a temporary lapse in judgment, a minor character flaw, or maybe just a sudden emotional outburst. But what if it's not? Think about it. Think of that notoriously toxic coworker, or that incredibly charming acquaintance who just always seems to get their way, leaving this subtle trail of destruction right in their wake. What if they aren't just having a bad day? What if the most profound manipulation out there is actually driven by an entirely different operating system? We usually think of dangerous people as these obvious threats, right? Monsters hiding in dark alleys. But the reality? The reality is far more unsettling. A lot of the time, they're hiding in plain sight. In our offices, in our social circles, literally, sometimes even in our own homes, they are the true architects of shadows. And to really understand them, we have to challenge basically everything we assume about why people do the things they do, and confront the really chilling machinery behind deliberate, calculated manipulation.
Okay, let's dive into this. To understand this machinery, we absolutely have to start with a foundational concept in psychology. It's known as the Dark Triad. Now, this isn't just one single flaw in character. We're talking about a highly specific trio of the absolute most destructive and malevolent personality traits in human behavior. When behavioral experts sit down to analyze the psychopathic mind, they're rarely just looking at one isolated issue. Psychopaths actually exhibit this highly dangerous and just incredibly complex amalgamation of all three of these traits, all working perfectly in tandem. It's literally an alchemy of malevolence. And it's this precise combination that creates such a formidable, toxic, and, ultimately destructive presence in the lives of anyone who happens to cross their path.
Let's move to and see how this builds, because understanding how these traits interlock is absolutely crucial. First up, we have Machiavellianism. Think of this as the strategic core. This is characterized by a deeply, deeply cynical worldview. To them, everyone around them is nothing more than a pawn on a chessboard. It involves chronic deception, non-stop manipulation, and the ruthless exploitation of other people, purely for personal gain. Next, we inject narcissism into the mix. But wait, this isn't just your everyday vanity. No, this is extreme egocentrism and delusion. It's a completely inflated sense of superiority that demands a constant, and I mean endless, feed of external validation and admiration. They don't just want to win the game, they need you to worship them while they do it. And finally, the anchor of this whole thing, psychopathy. This is marked by a profound lack of affective empathy, meaning they simply do not feel the emotions of others, full stop. Combine that frozen emotional core with high impulsivity, reckless thrill-seeking behavior, and a chilling, complete absence of remorse or guilt when they actually hurt someone, when you stack these three together, they feed off each other to form the ultimate blueprint of a truly destructive personality.
And this brilliantly illustrates what happens next. Imagine these three distinct traits, Machiavellianism, narcissism, and psychopathy, just gradually merging together into a single unified entity. So what are you left with? You are left with a persona whose eyes are completely dead, cold, and entirely devoid of genuine human emotion. And look, this isn't just a metaphor. It is the literal, clinical reality of an individual who has synthesized chronic deception, extreme egocentrism, and a total lack of remorse into one unified way of navigating the world. If you've ever actually looked into the eyes of someone like this, you might have felt this sudden, inexplicable sense of dread. It's like this uncanny valley where something looks human but feels distinctly vacant. They are fundamentally disconnected from the human experience. They're operating purely on calculation rather than any real connection.
Now, you might be wondering, okay, if they're so completely disconnected, how on earth do they navigate society so effectively, right? How do they seamlessly manipulate us if they literally don't understand feelings? Well, the terrifying truth is they do understand them, just not at all in the way we do. And this brings us to a highly effective tool they use, cognitive empathy. So cognitive empathy is the ability to intellectually process and understand that a person is in distress, but without experiencing any internal emotional resonance. They don't genuinely feel or internalize your pain. not even a little. Instead, cognitive empathy acts like a predatory radar system. They scan the room, they identify your vulnerabilities, and they process your emotions not as feelings but as raw data points to be exploited. It's kind of like they're an anthropologist studying a strange tribe, right? Learning the rules of a game they are totally excluded from actually feeling.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how that concept it's used in practice. Because they process emotions purely as data, they can completely weaponize that information. It becomes this flawless, calculated mimicry of appropriate emotions. Since they're processing our reactions intellectually rather than emotionally, they can use that radar of theirs to put on an absolute masterclass of a performance. It's pure deceptive mimicry. Like, if a situation requires a sad face, they will generate one. If it requires outrage, they will perform it flawlessly. But beneath the surface, the engine is entirely cold. It is a mask, and it's worn specifically to manipulate their surroundings, bypass our natural defenses, and achieve their own hidden agendas. But here's the catch. It takes a massive amount of cognitive energy to keep this mask on, which is why, every once in a while, when they think absolutely no one is looking, the mask slips.
So the crucial point is the contrast. To really crystallize this difference, I want you to imagine someone right in front of you just breaking down in tears, clearly in deep, agonizing pain. For a normal human, observing that distress triggers an automatic internal emotional resonance. We inherently connect to that person's pain. Our reaction to those tears is natural, authentic, and spontaneously compassionate. Our chest tightens, right? We want to help because we literally feel a fraction of their suffering. But for the psychopathic mind, wow, totally different story. They process that exact same distress with zero internal response, none. They understand you are sad on a detached intellectual level, sure, but their pulse doesn't quicken, their chest doesn't tighten, their reaction is entirely fabricated. It is feigned empathy, utilized only if it serves a manipulative agenda or yields some sort of personal gain. To them, your tears aren't a call for compassion. Actually, scratch that, it's worse. To them, your tears are a vulnerability. They are leverage.
To truly grasp the gravity of this void, we have to look beneath behavior and look directly at the actual hardware of the human brain. Specifically, we're talking about the amygdala, which serves as the brain's emotion center. When we look at the brain scans, we see a really stark neurological dichotomy. In a normal brain, the amygdala is highly active. It effectively processes, triggers, and regulates our emotional responses. When you see someone get hurt, your amygdala lights up like a Christmas tree. It sounds the alarm that empathy is required. In a psychopathic brain, however, it's a completely different story. In fact, neurological studies show that when exposed to the emotional stimuli of others, this vital center remains severely underactive, unreactive, or sometimes even functionally dormant. The physical alarm bell for human connection simply never rings. This means their lack of empathy isn't just, a bad attitude. It is deeply rooted in how their brain is, or I guess rather isn't, firing.
So we've journeyed from the broad psychological framework of the Dark Triad, down through the predatory radar of cognitive empathy, all the way to the microscopic lack of firing in the brain's emotion center. We've seen how empathy, the very glue of human society, can be simulated, hollowed out, and used as a literal tool for exploitation. Which brings us to a final, pretty lingering thought. If the very trait that makes us human, our capacity to feel for one another, can be weaponized as a cold, calculated illusion, how well do you truly know the minds around you? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep questioning the reality of the world you see.